Well, BC Conservative leader John Rustad is picking up the pieces after two MLAs quit his caucus over the weekend. Now, Peace River North MLA Jordan Keeley and Kelowna Lake Country Coldstream MLA Tara Armstrong left the party on Friday. Now, that followed Dallas Brodie's removal from the Conservative caucus over comments she made on a podcast about residential school survivors. Now, Keeley says he plans to form a new party and will join the other two newly independent MLAs for a news conference this morning at 9 a.m. to talk about where the BC Conservatives go from here. We are joined by Party Leader John Rustad. Good morning to you.
Good morning. Thanks for having me on this morning.
Thank you for being with us. Dallas Brodie's recent appearance on a podcast where she apparently belittled and mocked testimony of residential school survivors was not the first instance of offensive comments in public. In October, Brodie made comments about Indigenous people at a campaign event. There was criticism of her then. You stuck with her, though, as your candidate, knowing that this criticism was out there. Was that a mistake to stick with her?
Well, you can always go back and look in hindsight and think, woulda, coulda, shoulda. But at the time, we worked through. I spoke with our Indigenous candidates when that came out. They felt the issue, was a problem, but something that could be worked through, and hopefully something that could have been thought of as a learning experience. And clearly, in hindsight, so you look back at it, the learning experience didn't happen.
But even when she made public comments about residential schools and about what was found in the grave sites or not found in the grave sites of residential schools, insofar as what we knew from ground penetrating radar, you still stood by her. It was until the comments on the podcast that you finally decided to pull the plug. You have defended free speech as a core value of your party. Where's the line?
With regards to what Ms. Brodie had said about the Kamloops Residential School, she is correct in saying that out of the 215 potential sites or sites that had been identified with ground penetrating radar, there has not been any bodies found. So that part is true. Where I took issue is the fact that it should have been mentioned about the fact that more than 4,000 children across this country that were that went to residential schools died and were not returned to their families and were buried on sites. Most often, those were in cemeteries that were on reserves associated with with residential schools. And it's important to recognize that because of the pain and anguish and the suffering that many survivors went through as part of residential schools. And so that was something that was missing from her statement. However, her statement was factually correct. It was when she did a podcast where she came across as belittling people who were saying, their truth, the truth of what they experienced. That's what to me was offensive, and tried to address that. Unfortunately, there was no opportunity to do that, and so it left us with no other alternative. But when she walked out of caucus, is to not invite her back in.
Two more MLAs also quit your caucus on Friday because they apparently, disagreed with your decision to remove Ms. Brodie. What does that say about the unity of your caucus?
Well, I think when you look at us as the Conservative Party of British Columbia, we are focused on one thing and one thing only, which was bringing an end to what David Eby and the NDP are doing in British Columbia. It's been very, very damaging. That is what has united us, and that is what continues to unite us. With regards to the two that left, I find it interesting. They were part of a group that was trying to do some maneuvering and trying to take over the party as part of the AGM. That obviously failed. The person who was working with them received only about 35 votes. So they clearly had this in mind in terms of what they were doing. They made the decision to leave, and I wish them well in terms of it. But obviously, from my perspective, we need to stay very focused on what matters for people in British Columbia, which is things like getting rid of the carbon tax, providing tax relief, dealing with affordability. dealing with crime, dealing with the drugs on our streets. These are things that are critical for people in this province on a day-to-day basis, and that's where we're going to stay focused.
And does the division in your party go beyond the 3 MLAs who have departed?
Well, I'm sure there are some people who support those individuals, within that are party members within the structure. Obviously, there were some of those people that attended convention. However, it doesn't change the fact of where we need to be as a party. I mean, right now in British Columbia, more than half the people in this province are struggling just to put food on the table. Half of the youth in this province are thinking about leaving because they can't see how to build a future in this province. When did as a province did we become so much despair as opposed to where this province should be? We have all the resources, we have all the potential we could ever want as a province. We should be a place where people want to come and build a future because of all the opportunity, and that has been lost and has been squandered by the NDP.
I suppose what's also being lost right now, though, is that message. That is the message that you are trying to get across to voters and to British Columbians, and it has to be more difficult to do that when you have this divide in your party.
Well, it would have been better if we had tried to have everybody stay in the tent. It was something that, I worked on over the period of time to have them in, but these people had something else in mind in terms of what they wanted to do, and that's their prerogative to go about doing that, but it doesn't change who we are as a party and what we stand for, and that is what we're going to continue to fight for and do. And, for example, David Eby promised he would get rid of the carbon tax during the election campaign. Now all the federal parties are saying, with the exception of the federal NDP, are saying they want to get rid of the carbon tax, yet David Eby is still going ahead with a carbon tax increase on April 1st, so 20% increase to the carbon tax. I find that completely unacceptable, and we're going to continue to go after them and hammer these guys on this.
Is there not a chance that the federal government will get rid of the carbon tax before then?
British Columbia has its own carbon tax.
But David Eby, though, has said that he'll get rid of the carbon tax if the federal government gets rid of the carbon tax.
David Eby also promised to give $1,000 rebate immediately and $1,000 tax relief for people. He has promised many things, and quite frankly, he's lied to the public on many occasions. And when you look at his budget, when you look at the budget that he brought in just last week, that budget includes a 20% increase to the carbon tax on April 1. If he had any sort of thought at all, you would have seen that changed in his budget, but he didn't put it in. So what is he saying?
And back to your own party for the time being, if we could. So given that these are 3 MLAs, there were more apparently that supported this move at the AGM to have the party take another direction or to try to take over the party. Is that right?
Well, I don't know if any other MLAs were involved in that. My perspective was there was this group. There was a small group. Particularly, there was a couple of former candidates who felt that our party needed to be focused on different things. They weren't happy about how large a tent that we had become as a party. So I understand that those things happen, but it doesn't change who we are as a party and what we're focused on.
So what's the division as you see it then? If you can be specific, I mean, what's the ideological difference between where you want the party to be and where these other people want the party to be?
Well, clearly, we are not changing who we are as a party in terms of getting rid of things like SOGI and the sexualization of kids in our schools, getting rid of many of the other things, like, for example, safe supply, the drugs that are on our streets, making sure that we do significant tax relief for people to help deal with affordability. None of those things change. And quite frankly, I guess you're going to have to ask them exactly where their lines are in the sand, because, these are the things that we have always stood for. These are the things that we're going to continue to stand for. These are the things that I think they stand for, so you'll have to ask them why they don't see themselves as being part of a Conservative caucus.
Well, we will know because Jordan Keeley, Tara Armstrong, and Dallas Brody are holding a news conference this morning announcing that they're starting their own party, and that's going to take place just over 2 hours from now. Your party has elected MLAs. You've been the opposition for less than 6 months now. What is the future of the BC Conservatives if this is what happens to the party after just 6 months?
Well, I look at it this way. We built this party, at least I built this party in 18 months between February, March of 2023 through to the election in 2024, electing 44 members. We're building this party. We're going to continue that work. We're still in the building phase. So, were some mistakes made? Did we get through a proper vetting process with some candidates? Clearly, we've had a few issues. But that, is not unexpected for a party that has built and grown so quickly. Our process now going forward is going to be out, engaging with members, expanding our membership around the province, and continuing to strengthen this party. And that, to me, is where I see the Conservative Party going. We desperately need change in this province. We need to be able to bring hope and optimism for people. And that's what the Conservative Party is going to continue to deliver for people.
Dallas Brody says that there are other MLAs behind her. Are you expecting any more caucus members to leave the party?
I'm not anticipating anything at this stage. I mean, obviously, we'll see how things play out with regards to this. But and look, I mean, these three people have got friends in our caucus. They've got friends in our party. So it's, people are not exactly happy that this is happening. However, it was an untenable situation. But it's probably worth noting that these three people had been planning to do something like this right from the beginning. Ms. Brodie asked to be kicked out of caucus. She actually asked us to vote to kick her out of caucus as she stormed out of the room. And so, I'm not sure exactly how a situation like that continues to be tenable.
Ms. Brodie is the MLA for Vancouver Quilchena, which includes a Musqueam First Nation. Her comments will undoubtedly affect your party's relationship with that First Nation and First Nations across the province. What impact do you believe her comments will have on your party's relationships with Indigenous communities?
Well, I don't think it'll have any impact at this particular point. I've heard from numerous First Nation leaders across the province who have thanked me for what the actions that we took as a party. We continue to meet with First Nations about what we need to do with economic reconciliation, how we need to move away from DRIPA. You continuing to use UNDRIP as a guiding principle, but how we, as a province, need to move towards what we've been calling economic reconciliation, so that both Indigenous and non-Indigenous alike can prosper in this province.
But what does this do to representation for Indigenous people in the riding of Vancouver Quilchena?
Well, obviously they have an independent MLA, and they'll have to make a decision in terms of what their process is. My understanding, people have reached out to me already about exploring options in those various ridings. These are still early days, so we'll see what happens.
Is there anything you're doing to try to repair the damage that has been done?
With regards to?
Well, the relationships with the Indigenous community, within the party itself, and people who may be sympathetic to Keeley, Armstrong, and Brodie.
We're carrying on, like I say, with who we are as the Conservative Party of British Columbia. Nothing has changed in terms of what we are trying to achieve in British Columbia. The focus on making sure that we deliver hope and prosperity and opportunity for people in British Columbia, Indigenous and non-Indigenous alike. Nothing has changed because these three people have decided to go out and do their own thing.
Again, I'm just wondering, I mean, I know you're saying talk to them about, why they departed, but I'm just still wondering what your understanding is of the differences. I mean, Keeley, when he announced his resignation on Friday, said he wants a party that respects conservative values. I don't know what that means. What's your understanding of what that means?
You'll have to ask them what they mean by that. I understand what we are as the Conservative Party of British Columbia and the values that we stand for. I'm not sure exactly what Mr. Keeley was talking about.
And when he refers to your party as a toxic mess, what is he referring to there?
Well, I hardly think that's the case, considering our party is still growing. We had a very successful AGM where we had 800 people in attendance at the AGM. It's one of the largest AGMs that I've ever been to in the province of British Columbia, people from right across this province. Matter of fact, I think we are stronger today than we have ever been, even despite the losses. The number of people who have reached out to me and thanked me in terms of the move that we made with Ms. Brodie and their pledges and wanting to carry on with building this party, seeing us continue to grow as an organization, and to be in a position to take the NDP on and take them out in the next election.
And John, just before we go, your thoughts on what we saw over the weekend with Mark Carney being elected the new leader of the Federal Liberal Party and now Prime Minister designate?
Well, that'll be interesting to see how all of that plays out, especially given what's going on south of the border. My guess is that they're going to try to create an election as soon as possible, which is unfortunate. I mean, Mr. Carney has said that he wants to remove the carbon tax, even though I think he's planning to hide the carbon tax by taking out the consumer side and putting it onto the business side, which of course just gets passed down to consumers. He needs to go back into Parliament to be able to make that happen. So the question is he going to have the courage to actually do that, or is that just going to be a campaign promise like David Eby's made in British Columbia?
Mr. Rustad, appreciate your time as always. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me on this morning. Take care.
You too. Bye-bye. That is John Rustad, leader of the BC Conservative Party.